Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com, and in this video what we're going to do is we're going to complete sort of our exploration of Express. So in the first video we kind of set up Express and just learned the basics of building an API with Express. In the second video of this playlist, and again this is the Express Jquery playlist, if you're looking through all my playlists on YouTube, these videos will also be included in my other Express playlists. But in the second video we connected Mongoose and Mongo, and we added these routes in order for you to be able to add and retrieve dogs from your database. Okay, and then we use sort of an online database with Mongo Lab. Although, again, the username we set up was for 6 hours, so chances are I'm going to have to update that. So let me just take a look here. Let me run the server. Okay, and I want to be in CD test 1. Okay, let me just clear this real quick, and let's do npm run dev. Okay, yep. Then let's see, we had a couple different errors here, so let's see what they are. Okay. So whenever you see this particular error, this means that that port is already in use, which means I likely forgot to close the server earlier. Okay, yeah. Okay, I do have a command to fix that, but what I'm going to do just to save time, I'm going to go into my .env file, and oh, I didn't set the port here. Well, I'll set the port here. Port equals, I'm going to just say 3001. Okay, and then I'm going to go back to my server.js. I'll head back up over here. And I'm going to just go right here and do const port equals process.env.port. And then I'm going to go back down here to my listener and change it from 3000 to port. And then I'm going to change this message using backticks to use template literals. We're going to say listening on port, and then I'm just interpolate the port variable. There we go. Okay, so that way as I change the port, it just automatically adjusts itself. Okay, and let's run dev again. Interesting. I think this may be happening because of the Mongoose. It's attempting to log into Mongoose, then it's restarting the server, and that's causing, I'm assuming, a problem. Emitted error, event server interest. So what we're going to do is we're going to go fix that username. So let's head over to Mongo Atlas. Well, that's Postman. So let's open up Google Chrome. MongoDB. Sign in. Should be Alex Merced at alexmerced.com. Okay, here we go. I want to go to security to create another user. And you see that temporary user I made before disappeared. So what I am going to do is create a new test user. And again with the same password as before, password 12345. Okay, test. Test password 12345. This is going to be a temporary user. We will give it 1 day. Okay. Cool. Now let's see here. I'm going to go back over here. I need to go back to the URL, my .env. And, well, that's correct. Test password 12345. So I don't need to change that. So let's try to run the server again. Let me try a different port again. 3002. And let's kill the server. And there we go, listening on port 3002. Okay. So we got that set up. And again, in the previous video, we already tested out the API. The API works. But what I want to show you in this video is kind of how to make the front end, how to make the website that consumes this API straight out of your Express project. And I want to use Jquery. Don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole with like React, Vue, and Angular, but it's the same idea. So whatever way you want to build out your front end, basically what's going to happen is we're going to take advantage of this piece of middleware here. So in our middleware, we have Express static public, which allows us to build the website right out of this folder. So I am going to reorganize this a little bit. I'm going to just delete everything so we can see it from scratch. So I'm going to empty out my public folder. Because the way you should probably set it up is like so. You want to set up a folder for your CSS, set up a folder for your JavaScript, set up a folder for any images, and then create your index.html. So we're going to create our index.html there. We're going to create our style.css in this file. And we're going to create our app.js here. Okay. So let's go to our index.html, put our boilerplate. Okay, and then we want to link everything up. Okay, so we'll just link up our link tag, link CSS, and that's going to be not style.css/css/style. Because technically, again, this public folder is treated as your root when it's red. So technically anything that's in here starts with from the slash. So technically this CSS file, this folder would be CSS, and inside the CSS folder is style.css. So this would be the relative URL. And that's the beauty of doing it here, because you can set up relative URLs which you don't have to change later when you deploy it, because it's relative to wherever the hosting environment is. That's the kind of one benefit of doing it this way instead of doing them as two completely separate applications. I tend to like to do two separate applications altogether, but we're going to keep this simple. Okay, script source. Okay, now we do script source, and now this is going to be /js/app.js. Okay, and then I'm going to add the defer keyword. Cool. And then I'm going to put in an h1. And we're just going to say list of dogs. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to open up the site with web server, open with live server. Actually, I shouldn't have done that. Nope, let me close that. What I need to do is do this. Localhost. I already have it running on 3002, so I can just go to localhost 3002. There we go, list of dogs. Okay, sweet. So localhost is running through 3002, list of dogs. I'm going to open up the development tools, and we want to make sure that the CSS and all that stuff is working. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is test the JavaScript. So I'm going to go into the JavaScript file, and I'm going to add a console.log hello world. This is just to make sure that it's working. Okay. That's going to be annoying. It's looking like anytime the server restarts, it eats up the port. So I'm probably going to need to restart my computer at some point. But what I'm going to do in the meantime is I will not use Notamon. So I'm going to change this to .env, change this to 3003 now. Okay. And I'm going to do npm run start instead. That's our other script that only runs node. So this way it doesn't restart every time I save something. I'll just have to restart the server manually for the time being to save us having to restart the whole computer. Okay. So let me go back over here. Let me refresh the page. And it works. Okay, so our JavaScript file is connected. So we see the hello world right there. Next thing we want to do is test out that the CSS file is connected. Okay, style.css, and I'm just going to do a quick style h1 color blue. Or actually, do I have navy? Yeah, let's do navy. And save. I'm going to restart. Well, actually, I don't need to restart the server for that. technically anything in the public folder will just automatically update, even with, it's just because it's just serving those files. So if I refresh and see, it's blue now. Good. Okay, so in that case, we are good. Those files are connected. Only thing else I need is jQuery, code.jquery.com. So I'm going to go to code.jquery.com, click uncompressed, borrow the script file, or the script tag, head over back to VS Code, back to my index.html. And let's see here. I want that above all that stuff. So put that right there. I'm going to add the defer keyword at the end of the jQuery tag. So that way we don't have to worry about that loading before our HTML. Okay, and now we're all set. Okay, now the first thing I want to do is create a section where we list our dogs. Okay, so let me go back to the index.html, and below our h1, I'm going to create a div, and we're going to say div.list. That's going to be the class I'm going to give it. Okay, and in here there's going to be a UL, and that's where we'll list the dogs. Okay, which there's only one we made yesterday, which was like Sparky or something. But that's going to be what that is. So it's a div with the class list. I just want to make it look pretty first. So list, we're going to say, give it a width of 500 pixels and a height of 500 pixels. And we're going to give it a background color of navy and the color of the font white. Okay, so then we should have this big block on our page. And there it is. Okay, so all our dogs are going to be listed in here. Okay. Now, again, not super pretty. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time doing styling right now. Cool. So now what I want to do is we're going to go to app.js. So this is our front-end JavaScript file. There's a couple variables I want. I want to have that UL available to me because I'm going to append stuff to it. So I'm going to make a variable called UL. So const UL using jQuery. So using jQuery, I'll grab the UL. Okay. If you haven't seen one of my jQuery videos, I'd recommend watching that first. I'm not going to get into the nuts and bolts of jQuery right now. But basically what that's doing is just grabbing the UL and storing it in a variable so I can access it. Now what I want to do is grab the data from my API. So I'm going to use fetch. Okay. I'm going to fetch. And then technically the URL should be, I think, dog. Okay, so if I remember right, this should be dog. Let me just go back to my server.js. And yeah, it's /dog. Okay, that's the route. So if I go back to /dog, it's going to be an app.js. /dog, and I need to pass in, actually no, that should be fine for this. And then we get a response. We should get a response back. And we need to turn that response back into JSON. So response.json. And then we're going to get the data back. And we're going to do stuff with that data. So here's where I would, this dot then technically is a function of what would happen once I've done all these other things. Once I've gotten the data from the URL. Once I've turned that data into a JavaScript object. What do I want to do with it? Okay. So what I want to do with it is this. I want to do data dot for each, because I want to loop over each piece of data in the item. So data for each, and then I can pass in a function there. Now each piece of data, again, is an individual dog, because that's what our API is. We can create individual dogs. So we're going to say each dog. So for each dog, what we're going to do is we're going to create a new. So we're going to create, we'll just say dog equals a new li tag. Okay, so that's in jQuery how you make a new tag. So that's a new li, and then the text of that li is going to be, I'm going to use backticks to use string interpolation. And for that, I want to take a look at the schema of the dog. So let's go back over here. Oh no, the schema of the dog is going to be in models. So in models, the dog has a name and an age. Okay. So back to app.js. I want to say dog.name is dog.age years old. And where did I get that variable? Because we got this data that's an array, and each item in that's going to be an individual dog. So when we loop over it, each individual dog is a dog, and that's how we kind of got that. So dog.name, cool. And then we want to attach that to the UL. So the UL I already defined outside here, so it's global. So ul.append dog. Okay, so essentially what's going to happen is it basically does that. Okay, cool. So now let's test that out. Let's see if that works. Oh wait, is it 3003 now? There we go, and see, it got the data from the our API. So see, it works. Yay! That's neat. Okay, now what we want to do is add a form to build more dogs. I'll show you how to do that. Okay, so what we're gonna do, let's go back to our index.html. We need to build out the form. Okay, and I'm just gonna put it in a div. I'm not gonna use like a form tag. I don't know. I just don't prefer not to use form tags. Just because then you have to deal with like the default behavior and using prevent default. I'll just use input elements. You'll see what I mean in a moment. So here in this div, okay, this, we'll call this, we'll give this a class of form. Not that I really need to, other than for styling purposes. Okay, but we're gonna create one input tag. So this is gonna be an input of type text. Okay. Nope. There we go. Input of type text. And other properties I want to set there. I want to give it a name property. Generally, you want to give your inputs a name property. Makes it easier to grab them later. Name equals, this is going to be for name of the dog. So that's for the dog's name. That's what we're going to call it, name. And then input type equals number. Okay, then I want to give that one a name of age. Okay, and then I'm just going to have a button for submit. Create dog. Okay, so this should give us a little form, so a little field to put the name and the age and whatnot. Save right now, which right now does nothing. So if I go back to the website, see we have this form down here. It does nothing. Let's just make that look a little bit nicer. So I'm gonna make this 250. We don't need it to be so tall. Okay, and I'm gonna make form. I have a little padding or margin. Margin 20 pixels. Okay, and dot form input. So any input with the type of text, because I don't want to necessarily. Actually, yeah, I'll just form style all the inputs. So in the form, so we'll just say all of them have a background color of navy, font color of white. They're all gonna have a padding of 5 pixels, so that way the text isn't so claustrophobic. Okay, and that kind of gave us a little bit. It makes it just a little bit more aesthetically pleasing. And then I want to style that button. So I'm actually just going to add the button here too. So dot form button. So that way it styles both. There we go. That's all consistent. Okay, good, 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 good. And then actually I should probably add padding here, because see, that's a little right up against the edge. So that list, padding, 10 pixels. Okay, and that's a bit better. Okay, so what we want to do is set it up that I can put in here and I can be like, you know, Spot is 3 years old. I'll hit create dog and it'll add it to this. So what I need to do is set up a function that's going to create a dog. Well, when we click on the button, it's going to pull the data from these two inputs, send them via our second API endpoint, the post route. So if you remember the post route from the previous video, it's going to send that data to our API, update our database with the new dog. Then we're going to query the database again for the full list of dogs, and then rebuild the list of dogs in the UL. That's essentially what we're going to do here. That's the steps. Okay, so we need to create a function for when that happens. Okay. Cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a function. So we're going to say const. We'll call it handle add. So it handles the event when we add a dog equals event. Okay, because we always got to pass in an event object in our event handlers. And I want to make this an async event, so I can use async await. Just because I like async await, makes everything look a little bit cleaner. And let's do it. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is grab data from the forms. Grab data from the form. Okay, so we're going to have a variable called name. That's going to hold the new dog's name. And we're going to get that from the form value. So we're going to say const. We're going to grab it from the element on the screen, the one that has a name of name. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm grabbing it based on the attribute of name. There's only one element on the screen that actually has a name property that equals name. That's the name. And then I want to grab the value from that form element. So I'm going to do .val, which grabs the value of that. Then I'm going to basically do the same thing with age. Okay, and now we have those two numbers stashed away. Okay, so, or those two pieces of information stashed away. So that's goal number one. Now that we've grabbed the form values, now we need to do make post request to create a dog. And that's going to require fetch. So that's going to be fetch. And now the URL is still going to be post. I mean slash dogs. Okay, because with the way we set it up, going back to our server.js, see, it's either way it's dog, but again, there's a get route, which is when we get the dogs, and then there's a post route from when we create the dogs. Okay, this is all in the previous video. Okie dokie. So I'm going to do that. But to do a post request, I have to make it specific that it's by default it does get, so I don't have to do extra stuff for a get request. But when I want to do a post request, I have to give it extra information. So I have to pass in a secondary object that has data like method. I'm going to say the method is post, and I have to tell it that the data we're sending is what's called JSON data. So I have to specify that in what's called headers. And then headers is a whole separate object of headers. And every header has a key in the value. Okay, and okay, I think it's like application data. Let me think about this. It's escaping me at the moment. So let me just JSON data headers. Okay, there it is, content type. So the header is content type. Content type header JSON. Yeah. So it's content type, and it's JSON, so I should do it this way. Content type although I think my prettier is going to just remove the quotation marks anyways. It'll still work. Content type, and then I'm specifying that it's JSON data, so it's application JSON is supposed to be the value. So this basically says, hey, server that I'm sending this data to, the content that I'm sending over is in the form of JSON data, just so you're aware. Okay, that's what these headers do. They kind of send information to the server. So there's that. I need to include the body, which is the data that is JSON. Okay, and we want to make sure we turn it into a JSON string. So we have to do json.stringify. That's a function that takes like an object and turns it into a JSON string. And then inside there is our object with our data, which is just the name and the age of the dog. And since the variables are already called name and age, I can just do it like this, and I don't have to do like name equals name, age equals age. It's just, you can just plop them in there, and the object will automatically take those values. So that makes it look nice and tidy. So let's see here. We know what the method is. Got the headers. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to include in there. I think that's good. Okay, so that way it hits the post route. The server will know to use the JSON middleware to parse it, and then here's the data. So that seems pretty good to me. And again, I wanted to use async await, so I'm going to just do a wait fetch. I don't really care about keeping the data that it returns. Okay, so that's fine. What I'm going to do is we do have to go get the full list of dogs again. So I'm going to do const all dogs equals fetch await fetch slash, well, actually first we're going to do response, const response equals await. So this is essentially the same thing I did before, except now that I'm using async await, I don't have to use these .then. So instead of .then response, I'm just saying the response equals the result of await fetch slash dog. See, this kind of looks a lot cleaner. And then const the data equals await response dot JSON. Okay, so this is literally the same as these two lines right here. Just kind of, I don't know, I just think it looks nicer than the .thens. And then I can go do my thing. Okay. And what I want to do is, so basically at this point, and it's just kind of, let me just put another comment here. Get full list of dogs again. So we created the dog. Now we're getting a full list of dogs. Now I want to empty the UL. So ul.empty. That's going to get rid of the list that currently exists. And then we're going to rebuild the UL, which is just literally going to be the exact same thing as here. So I'm just literally going to copy this for each here, because we're going to do the exact same thing. And I even renamed the variable data again, so that way it's just literally works. And yeah, that's just going to reappend the UL every time I add a new dog. It just rebuilds it. Okay, cool. So that's the function. Const handle add is going to do all that. Again, it's going to grab the data from the form values, then make the post request to create the dog, then make a get request to get the new updated list of dogs, empty the UL, and then rebuild the list with the new updated list. That's essentially what it's doing. So now I just have to add that function to happen when that button gets pushed. So I'm going to grab the button using Jquery. There's only one button on the screen, so I can just do button. Do .on. It's a click event. And we're just passing in handle add. Okay, and there we go. Now we should be all set to go. So back over here to this. Let me refresh. Okay, so let's try to create Spot, who is 2 years old. I click create dog, and look, Spot is 2 years old. If I try to create Fluffy, who is 6 years old, and it's added. And the thing is that this is now permanently added to my database. So now if I were to refresh this, the whole list is still there, because it's not a temporary list in memory, it's in my database, and that's the beauty of having a database. It's persistent. The data doesn't go away. So So essentially, what we've done is we've created an Express server with the API, and we've used that API to serve our front end, which we built out using jQuery. And now I can just keep adding to this list of dogs. I can't really do much else. I didn't create any other routes. I could have created like a route for deleting dogs, an API route for updating the dogs, and then built the front end to handle those. But this kind of gives you the idea of how this all works. Okay, so essentially, again, all that's happening is that this front end browser-based code is communicating with our back-end server endpoints. Those are the /dog endpoints that we defined in our server.js. So looking at our code, essentially all this runs in the server except for the code that's in our public folder. That runs in the browser because it's being served statically. So yeah, I'll leave it at that. I don't want to get too down the rabbit hole, but hopefully this gives you a better idea of working with Express, building a front end, back end API, and having a front end that consumes it. Essentially the same idea. If you were using React, Vue, Angular, it's the same concept. You would find some sort of way to, but you could just use fetch to grab that data from the API and then just render it to the screen. That's the theme here. So I'll see you guys later.